All right, so I'll just go ahead. This is a quote again from Mormon Murders. He had stolen the authentic 1830s paper from a book at the University of Utah Special Collections Library. Quote, this quote is from Mark Hoffman himself. The handwriting style of the letter was copied basically from the available Martin Harris signatures, the samples of letters and styles from that era, and the common style and standards that were employed at that time. I attempted to keep the handwriting of the letter consistent with the handwriting of the known Martin Harris signature. I researched the mail schedules from and to Palmyra and the surrounding area and knew what post office date and mark to affix. I knew that prior to 1829, the Palmyra postmark was black and afterwards it was red. The beginning of the letter, quote, I received your letter today and hastened to respond, was from words I had seen in actual letters from that era and place. So I was sure the time sequence was proper, unquote. And then another quote from him, basically, I created what I believed the actual history to be. I believe Joseph Smith was involved in magic. The early writings of Joseph Smith didn't characterize his experience as a first vision, but a dream. I was aware that salamanders and toads are commonly associated with magic literature. The salamander letter was a magic forgery, unquote. For the ink, he picked a recipe containing tannic acid, ferric acid, gum arabic, and logwood, and went to the chemistry stand at a local hobby store in Logan for the ingredients. Perfect Chemicals is the brand name, he enlightened them. That is the jury. After the ink had dried, he soaked the document in hydrogen peroxide, dabbing it on with a piece of tissue. That oxidized the black ink to a, quote, appropriate brown color, unquote, to make it look as if the Anton manuscript had been in the Bible for many years. Remember, it was found in the back of an old 17th century Bible that actually Mark had glued it into. He wadded sheets of aluminum foil the size of the folded transcript, heated them with an iron, and I remember from the book, it was actually an iron that you would use to iron your clothes, and placed them in the Bible where he intended to put the transcript itself, quote, to make it look like the acid from the paper had browned the leaves of the Bible. The paper came from an edge page of a book in the Institute Library at Utah State. He then dipped the paper in a hot gelatin solution to give it a new sizing, since sizing tends to wear off as paper ages. Without the sizing, the ink would have feathered or spread out too much when it came into contact with the old absorbent paper. After writing the text, he applied heat with an iron, then poured hydrogen peroxide on it to age the ink and to remove the sizing where it wasn't protected by the ink. Quote, it was ragged as well as aged. It is true that it was a genuine paper from that period, but I thought it would be more convincing rather than being pure white to show that it had a high acid content. I also wanted to have it to have high acid content so it would stain the page in the Bible, unquote. Finally, he sprayed the document with a solution of gelatin and milk in order to create foxing or rust spots. It was completed in a day, he said. Hoffman described the extraordinary lengths to which he had gone to formulate the ink. Quote, I knew that this document would be scrutinized, so I took pains to ensure that the ink would not differ from the 17th century printing ink. I obtained, this is actually, this particular quote is about the Oath of a Freeman document that he forged. I obtained some paper from the same time period, approximately, from Brigham Young University Library. The paper did not have printing on it, which I guess they'll be happy to hear. That paper I burned in an apparatus to make carbon black. The reason I went through this trouble is because I thought that there was a possibility that a carbon-14 test would be performed on the ink. He then took the carbon and mixed it with linseed oil. The linseed oil was heavily boiled, which thickens it, and then it was burned. To that, he added a solution of tannic acid that he created by taking a piece of leather binding from a book of that period and boiling it in distilled water, quote, until it turned a nice brown color. With a final touch of beeswax, the ink was ready. So, I mean, this is like an alchemist.
Yeah.
You know, this is...
I've always thought that from the beginning of this, that what he really had done was discovered alchemical information that allowed him to do this with confidence. That it's not, you know, he's not figuring this out like when you're trying to troubleshoot your car and you don't really know about motors. You know, he's found the linear left to right instructions and followed them to make sure that he pulls it off, and maybe added some things like you just said, like, well, they do have carbon-14 dating, so I added a step in case, you know, with consideration of that being a possible checkpoint that they might want to go through or something, you know. But it's
this is amazing, because a couple of years ago I was doing some reading about alchemy. I came across this piece that was all about how so much of alchemical secrets and formulas and operations that were being performed and were known about, often being done for princes or other nobles, you know, on their behalf. An alchemist would be hired to do something. A lot of it was just mixing chemicals to create certain dyes and paints and inks to be used on books or clothes, or, you know, painting a cathedral. That only alchemists would know how to make certain colors. And people, you know, outside of that trade would know how. It was considered this, you know, very precious secret. And, you know, I thought that was important, and I kind of stuck it away in my brain, but I didn't know what I'd end up doing with it. A couple of weeks ago, I made a bunch of videos about Notre Dame. I was reading from the Fulcanelli book about alchemy, that's saying that there's all these alchemical secrets embedded within the gargoyles and the architecture of what used to be Notre Dame in Paris. And I remember Fulcanelli kind of implying, if not outright saying at one point, that one of the things the alchemists knew how to do basically was make reality and make specifically history. So I need to go back and pull out those quotes, because maybe they can go into a different context now. Like, I felt like he was telling us that alchemists can fake history. And I've been thinking for a while that faking history is a form of alchemy. It's part of the process of creating a magical world, a new magical universe. So I'm wondering if there's a very specific link here. I mean, look, I'm just wondering out loud, you know, I'm not like proposing a specific theory here, but, you know, like I said, a lot of magic is illusion, creating effective illusions. So, you know, if we are living in a world that was created, you know, maybe 500 years ago or less, for instance, according to some people's theories, and you know, all of this stuff that we think of as evidence of a longer history has somehow been concocted in a shorter period of time, there's something definitely magical about how all of that would have been put together. And, you know, most of it would have been done just with the fact that they, you know, can, you know, have this one reference point, this one timeline, and then everything is just, you force everybody to interpret everything according to that timeline. That's how most of the faking is done, just with that one mind trick.
Right.
But to a certain extent, there's got to also be faking of antiquities. And I'm wondering if there are alchemists out there doing this stuff, participating in the faking of history, and if they're part of some, you know, secret society of alchemists that we've never even heard about. You know, maybe they work for the government, or they work for some other power that we don't even know about.
Well, it makes me think of your and Harrison's presentation about the secret statutes of the Templars, and the fact that, okay, so there's always this accusation of Masonry specifically that, oh, it's all because it started as keeping the secrets of the trade guild, and that graduated into this pomp and circumstance, overly abundant ritual thing, right? That it started out like you're just not supposed to tell how to make the blue dye, right? Or how to make a mirror is a great example if you look in history. The secret I learned at the Palace of Versailles, the tour guide told us that Louis XIV had offered a huge bounty to send his men to go, I think it was to Venice, and figure it out. Like they have mirrors and I don't, so go figure it out. So there's some legitimacy there that it might be the idea of protecting trade secrets and stuff, but that added to what you and Harrison brought out and other stuff that's all kind of it's all kind of hedging around the one thing that behind the scenes there's this truly unified universal group that they don't even have to speak the same language. Just through hand signs they can identify one another as part of the brotherhood. There's rites of passage that are so nuanced and specific that they can disqualify anyone that's not a part of it by a ritual like, well, spit on the cross and curse Jesus' name, and you only get half of it right, so they've disqualified you now because it's such a specific thing. And that behind the scenes of all of it, that what they're doing is they're manufacturing and creating reality right now. They're managing and curating whatever magic is already in place. And in my opinion, what we're seeing is them in the process now of making a bigger, like a grand changeover from wherever we've been into what I'm calling communitarianism, because it's not just on one political side. The whole goddess worship side and the whole ecumenicism of religion is all a bit, that's another big wing of the whole movement we're seeing happen. The bringing out of magic, the Pope agreeing to this these agreements with the Muslims, all of this stuff is another big, that's the next book that lady Nikki Rapana is supposed to write. She calls it the Green Goddess book that explains that side of it as opposed to the political side. So I'd say all the stuff that that we're seeing implies very much what you're saying, that there's a group of people that are behind the scenes. And and they're not necessarily reptilians or other dimensionally alien type things. They're just people that are in the know, and they're in communion with spirits that are guiding them to parallel reality, so that we live in the parallel and not in that we don't even get to know actual reality. We don't get to know the real shape of the earth. We don't get to know the nature of things because they're always working with what's already in place or getting ready to replace it with something else.
What seems key to me here is that Joseph Smith never taught the origin of the universe. He never explained any of that stuff. His story starts with Elohim and Yahweh. I think he actually said they were separate. Anyway, they are men. They are humans that create a universe. And then he teaches that when you die, if you're a good Mormon, if you're a man and you're a good Mormon, you will create your own universe after you die. And you'll bring your wives with you, and you'll be the god of that new world. Now, they interpret it, they say planets now, or I don't know, I've heard people say planets. But I doubt if Joseph Smith said that originally. Who knows? He probably would have said whatever he thought, would have been accepted at the time. But at any rate, it fits right in with what we're talking about here. Mormonism is a religion about creating your own universe, being the god of your own universe.
I remember a black guy coming to our Baptist church and explaining all of that you just said to us, and explaining to us that he was told that if he did a good job as a black Mormon man, that when he got to that stage that he would become white. I mean, it was because it was an expose of Mormonism by a Protestant Baptist man. But I remember it very specifically because I was I wasn't very old, and it was very shocking. Like, well, that's really weird. They get to go off into space and everybody gets to populate their own planet. and throw in some racism, some massive racism to the side of it too. You know, and all the black people get to become white. I remember being like, "Whoa, Mormonism is weird," you know. But that's
But it's because reality is entirely malleable and creative. But humans have the power to create reality in that worldview. That's the magical worldview. This is alchemy. This is Enochian magic.
Yeah, that's what they're all the little dividers that they've stuck in there that separate all these things from one another. The more you peck at it, especially with deeper insights like we've all found on our own and kind of shoved into one place, it looks like they're mostly symbolic. Like behind the scenes, it really is something like a unified system that allows you to, you know, to create a world on top of the one you're in if you do it right.
The only thing I don't know if it allows anyone to do is have the bird's eye view of the whole universe and every universe that's ever been created and anything that like what you think of as reality. I don't know that this worldview allows for that, even any kind of objective reality. So I don't know. It's like trying to stand on the ocean, I guess. There's no basis for anything, but I guess that's what faith is all about too, right? I mean,
well, and what popped into my head when you said that is Mithras finally thinking he's got the tip-top mountaintop view and his head coming up through the floor. You know, that's what popped into my head. And I'm seeing it in the chat, high on down to Kolob. We used to joke about that. That's the hymn that is, I'm pretty sure it's been removed now, but Kolob was... That's the Mormon wagon train out into heaven to populate your own worlds. Is Kolob, high on down to Kolob. Look it up. It's funny.
Yeah. Well, I think. Okay, there's something I've been meaning to talk about. I mean, I don't know if I have time to squeeze it in here or not, but it sort of ties in with what we were just saying. It has to do with the headstone, the cornerstone becoming, or the stone that's rejected becoming the cornerstone of the temple.
Right.
Right. Okay. So Fulcanelli mentions that, and he comes right out and says that the rejected stone is Lucifer. And I went and I found some others, things in Masonic ritual that definitely seem to be implying that. And I even thought that, when I looked at some of the biblical descriptions, it seemed like that's a possible interpretation. When you also then, okay, there's another extra biblical text, maybe the Wisdom of Solomon. I don't know. I need to remember which one it is, but it talks about there being this pillar in Solomon's temple that is held up by Asmodeus, and that this is his punishment, is that he has to hold this pillar up, and really it's holding up the whole edifice of the structure. It's right. It's not just the pillar. It is acting as this. Well, really, it's kind of like a keystone. I mean, I don't know what cornerstones are kind of decorative, I think. I don't know what they literally meant in operative masonry. But anyway, it's something, the way they're describing it, it's like, okay, he's holding up this thing that allows the whole structure to stay up. And if he wasn't holding it, if Asmodeus wasn't holding this stone on his shoulders, then Solomon's temple would collapse. And Solomon's temple is like a model for, or it's a metaphor for the whole universe, for the world,
right?
At the very least. And they definitely have that interpretation in Freemasonry. There's a book by Albert Mackey where he says that very explicitly. So it seems to me like Asmodeus is kind of acting as this keystone for the existing universe, the ordered existing universe. But the same text that I was just mentioning also talks about how he has nothing to stand on. But it also describes the other demons as kind of being like as though they were stars out in space in the night sky, and that they're constantly falling because they don't have any level ground to stand on, and that's part of their torture. Is they're always trying to get some footing, and they don't have any. So then that gives you an idea of why this being in this position, this Atlas position, is so torturous for Asmodeus, is because he has to hold everything up, but he doesn't have anything to stand on himself.
Right.
He's standing on chaos.
And Harrison's pointing out that the keystone is the gap in the royal arch. That is the hole in the ceiling. Just confirming everything that you're saying. That this is that like the Pac-Man screen, right? You go in one side and come out the other. You go up to come down, etc. So. And what you just said is more of a paradox too, because then you're foundationally standing on what you're standing where you can't stand, and you're moving where you can't move.
Yeah. So I think of that as being connected to this idea of well, if we can be gods and we create our own universes, then it sounds like fun, but the ultimate result of that is that there is no God greater than you, and therefore you don't have any greater truth to stand on. Which is, I guess, I think of it, to me, this is the role that a Christ figure would play, where, we may be in the waters of chaos here when we're looking at mythology and different religious scriptures, trying to figure out what's real. Especially when we entertain the idea that we can even change reality with things that we do and say and think. But, if you are someone that is able to believe in Jesus or in Christ, I think that, there's a reason why he's compared to a rock, that you can stand on when everything else is falling around you. That because he's so protean, because he can be interpreted in so many different ways, even though some people think that that's what makes him unreal, I think that that's what makes it so useful.
Here, amen. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what makes it work.
Yeah, you can have it, and you don't even have to be able to explain to yourself why you have it,
Yeah, and so I would say that's a good example of how whatever the trickery of magic words and sales and marketing all combined for something like Mormonism or Jehovah's Witnesses. So they have a good, they have an effective false version. It works, but it's not whatever you were just describing and what we were talking about earlier. It's once again, it's a shadow of it, but it's not it. That's the. We're getting a few all caps questions. I don't know how much time you have left, but I know a few people were trying to squeeze a question in. But if you don't want to field questions this week and follow up, we could even follow up next week with this similar topic, or we could, I'm trying to fill you out for. I know you wanted to step away. Do you feel comfortable to answer a couple questions or not, Tracy?
Well, I'm seeing the all caps questions, and yeah, these are like things that I couldn't answer briefly, so I'll touch on it some other time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm feeling like we're kind of at a great point to just kind of everybody give the okay bye and stop. I know it's almost seems like cutting short, but I feel like I have a lot to ruminate on now. My mind's kind of blown. This was great. I didn't expect us talking about Mark Hoffman to digress into what I would call deep spiritual philosophy, especially right onto the. I feel like we're on the cusp of being able to almost articulate why Jesus as the Christ is important, but at the same time, I feel like that's a great time to say, all right, well, here we are. We made it this far. Thanks for being with us. and let's follow up. Let's follow up next week.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. Why ruin a good thing?
I agree.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, folks, and we will follow up with you. We'll be in touch. Grab us in the Discord. It's the bottom link. If you're enjoying this, please sign up for Plus Ultra Club on Tracy's website. It's plusultraclub.com. And I'm gonna push the button. I'm gonna say okay bye. Jim, you gonna tell him okay bye?
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.